You're watching PCTV Channel 17, proudly serving the Port Clinton City School District community. The following is a production of the Port Clinton High School Digital Media class.
Welcome to Time for Health. I'm your host, Rachel Fall, and we're very glad you've joined us. We hope you gain something from the program that helps you and your loved ones. We want to arm everyone with as much information as possible so we can all make good choices. And this is not to take the place of regular medical care, so be sure to include your healthcare provider in on your plans and your conversations. And today is a very timely topic of S.A.D, or seasonal affective disorder. And our guest is Kari Wright. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
And you're with Firelands Counseling and Recovery of Ottawa County.
Yes.
Okay. So in the mental health field.
Correct.
Because S.A.D isn't just S.A.D, it's seasonal affective disorder.
Correct.
And I was thinking of the irony of us taping this show because our first attempt was canceled because of
the
inclement
snow.
weather.
Okay.
So appropriate. So talk a little bit about what seasonal affective disorder is.
Sure. Seasonal affective disorder is actually a subset of a depression disorder.
Okay.
But there is a little bit of some specific requirements. It is strictly around the seasons, and it's not related to maybe outside stressors such as seasonal work, which could create kind of an underlying stress. But it is strictly related more to the weather and the kind of overcast nature of this kind of season, although it can happen in the summer as well for people in extreme heat. But it does have to occur for at least 2 years, and you typically find that a person's impact to the season occurs more often than not.
Okay. So it has to happen for 2 years. It has to do in usually cold, but you mentioned hot, which we'll get to in a moment. So there's kind of some requirements. It's not just, it's winter, I feel down, I must have seasonal affective disorder.
Correct. And you can kind of notice some mood changes, some similar symptoms to depression, where maybe your appetite changes, sleep changes. They kind of contribute some of there's no real cause, but there's some, say, suspicions of maybe related to circadian rhythm for sleep, with, it kind of being gray and overcast. You don't have a true, say, sunset, or, sunrise, sunset. Serotonin levels change in your body because you're not getting as much sun, which has to do with vitamin D levels, serotonin levels, and melatonin, which comes from sunlight.
Okay. So it's a subset of depression.
Correct.
Okay. So it's a real diagnosis.
It really is.
It's for real. Now, last winter was horrific.
It was, I heard.
You heard that,
Fortunately, I did not live here.
You weren't there then. Was there an increase, do you know? I don't know if there's stats. Was there an increase last year because it was so very bad around here?
In my research, I didn't really find anything specific, but just out of maybe a little bit of speculation, I would say so. It was a really long, harsh winter.
Yes.
And while you typically see the peak of seasonal affective disorder, January, February, it can actually begin in August and go all the way to May. So it can be pretty extensive in terms of its impact. But people usually see like those hard, cold, bitter winter months, the January, February, to be the biggest impact.
Is there such a thing as winter blues, or
same thing?
It is the same.
It is the same thing.
Okay.
It's kind of been that cliche, and seasonal affective disorder, while those of us that lived here kind of always knew that something existed, it didn't become a formal diagnosis until recently.
Okay.
And that's kind of where the terminology of, the winter blues or winter depression, or that's where that came from.
So it has been around for a while, just not formally.
Correct.
And you kind of started talking about a few of the signs and symptoms, but talk a little bit more about that. Like, what should we watch for in ourselves or in other people?
Just kind of overall, maybe a little more sad, disengaging from activities. Sometimes your body kind of feels heavy.
Okay.
Craving sugary, more carbo, comfort foods,
sure.
Can really have an impact, and you really kind of see that during this time.
And you said it's not necessarily because of, maybe somebody has lost a loved one during the winter. That might be more the grieving if some of those symptoms show up, it might be more of the grieving process versus the season.
Interestingly, grief has some similar symptoms of depression as well. So you're kind of double-edged sword, but that's where it can take, doing some ruling out, as we would call. How long have you experienced it? What is it like for you? When does it come? When doesn't it come?
Gotcha.
Some very specific questions about those symptoms and time frame and what that looks like individually.
Okay. And does it impact kids like it impacts adults?
Even more common, actually, for people that are a little bit younger.
Okay.
And so, yes, it does. And they tend to be more active, so I think that can counteract it a little bit. Exercise is important. Maybe not in partaking in that candy bar that you may want all the time, and watching your eating habits, but it does impact them.
So those are some of the symptoms, some of the kind of not as kind of withdrawing and craving more.
Correct.
I just thought that was me. Oh no, maybe I
in the
have
winter, your body is shivering to stay warm, and so which produces, say, some heat, maybe a little more hunger.
Gotcha.
So then you're like, let me eat. That's kind of how we get those couple extra pounds of trying to stay warm and feel satisfied. But
can it be cured, or do you just deal with it? Does it happen every year for people? I'm sorry.
If they truly have seasonal affective disorder, then typically, yes, it will happen every year. Or, like I said earlier, it will happen more times than not.
Okay.
And so they're going to see a typical repeat in kind of how their body is processing the lack of sunlight in this time of year.
Okay.
But in terms of cure, there is some treatments. Light therapy is very common today, whether that be, photo box, some people, tanning beds, but definitely a conversation with physician, because there are some supplements as well that people can use. But again, under the guidance of a professional is where you would really want to do that.
So it's not necessarily something that's cured, it's just something that you kind of treat while you have it?
Correct. Because it is seasonal, eventually it will go away. So in a sense, that's its own cure. But while you have it, it can be rough for people.
Do you, so people would come talk to their physician or call
see a therapist,
somebody about it instead of trying to, doing your own ruling out and your own diagnosing, maybe going to see somebody who can kind of help you through that process.
Absolutely. Do you recommend that? In terms of a counseling or therapist support, we can work on maybe some of the things. When you're feeling depressed, your mind isn't working the way that you maybe would like it to.
Gotcha.
You're feeling down, so your thoughts are down. So as a professional, we can, and as a counselor, we can help people to sort through what those thoughts are and kind of remind them
pull them up a little bit.
Pull them up. Is there more times of the day that happens? What things can you put in place to do that? In terms of exercising or a self-affirmation statement or utilizing your support system, and maybe even tweaking your diet. If you're kind of craving sugary carbo foods, they're going to weigh you down. But if you make a conscious effort to maybe eat a salad every day, or just eliminate
move a little bit, exercise a little.
Exactly, it can kind of decrease some of those symptoms and feeling so sluggish.
Because it seems like it could be a really pretty vicious circle, because you feel disengaged, you're craving carb food, and then so then you feel worse, and then it just makes you want to do that more and more and more, and it just can kind of spiral.
Exactly. And
do you see people that really, I mean, around here that have it or have it really significantly?
You know, I haven't seen that as much, but as I started to say, I haven't been in the winter months for several years. But yes, in terms of Firelands, we absolutely see that. And it can get so intense for people that sometimes they begin to have suicidal ideation.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very important
not to be messed around.
Exactly.
Not just the winter blues.
Right, and not to just dismiss it and, you know.
I'll be fine in April.
You know, and then those people that already have maybe some mental health concerns, it can really compound for them. And so that extra support, that's what we're here for. And unfortunately, there's still some stigma in our society about mental health needs. But I always tell people it's no different than trying to maybe treat diabetes or treat high blood pressure. There's something going on in your body.
It's biological.
That needs some attention, and there's professionals that help for that attention need.
And could people have maybe both, they might have seasonal work, or they may have lost a loved one, or they may, you know, already struggle with depression, but it's worse during the winter seasons, and so you kind of treat both.
Yes, and that's where it compounds, and that's where meeting with a professional psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor can really help to sort through what that is. You know, sometimes when you're feeling those maybe symptoms of depression or just feeling down, I always kind of describe it as you have this one problem. But if you've lost a loved one, you're out of work, you're having some seasonal affective disorder, it's cold, and you're not eating right. Those are 5 different things.
Gotcha.
So then your options open, and it's not just one issue.
One big problem. Very interesting. All right, thank you for that start of a look, and we'll be right back. Talking about seasonal affective disorder, and winter blues kind of been around for a while, but it's an actual diagnosis, subset of depression, not to be messed around with.
No, it's not. And I could tell that you were a little surprised about
that it can really compound
the impact that it can have on people.
Especially if somebody, like you were mentioning, has other things going on too that can just make it seem a little bit overwhelming.
Correct.
You briefly mentioned in the beginning, I always think that it only happens in the winter. It only happens, in the Midwest, where it's so lovely sometimes. The heat can do the same thing. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, when you talk about just the oppressiveness of heat, and none of us really like to be hot and sweaty, and and just you definitely feel weighed down. And having lived in the heat, just like the cold weather takes your breath away, you walk outside and the heat can take your breath away. And you've got Arizona where it's maybe drier heat, Florida where it's humid, and those real feel temperatures just like we have here. The heat index versus the wind chill factor is very real. Highs of maybe 122, just very, and so, in that, you tend to see more aggressive behavior rather than depressive symptoms. So it has a little bit of a different manifestation, so to speak.
Okay, but it is an issue there too.
Correct.
But probably in like San Diego, where the average temperature is 70, it's warm there, but the average temperature is 75, probably not so much out there. Because I was asking, does it happen in the Bahamas? Does it happen in...
And again, in terms of, say, winter blues in Florida, like a 1.9%, so it's pretty low, versus Alaska, where you've got upwards of 9.9%.
Oh, we think it would even be higher than that.
And in certain populations, it can get as high as 25%. Women are more prone. Again, those kind of very specific months.
Okay.
You hear a lot of people, even Seattle, where they get a lot of rain. and it's kind of that gray overcast, some very similar.
So, I mean, and you mentioned it has to do with daylight, not just cold and, wanting to bundle down, but daylight. And so I was going to ask about Alaska because I'm not really sure, but aren't there times of year when there's
periods of darkness?
Predominantly nighttime all the time.
Correct.
Or darkness all the time.
And so the farther you get from, the equator, you lose days where shorter days, in this time of year we've got short days, and people, you go to work, it's dark, you leave work, it's dark. So you're not getting much exposure to sunlight, and sunlight comes in through, granted you get it in your skin, and so it helps produce the vitamin D, but in terms of converting to melatonin, it comes through your eyes. And so if you're not getting sunlight, your body isn't converting.
Gotcha. So that's an issue in Ohio where there's shorter daytime hours, but in Alaska when there's virtually no daytime hours for parts of the year.
And that's where you see the increase in terms of area of the country.
Do people kind of adapt to it? Like, I thought the percentage would be higher. Do you think people have just become more resourceful or adapt to it? Like, I'm choosing to live in Alaska. I know that certain times of the year there's not much daylight. Do you think there's part of it that...
everything that we know research-wise has to be reported. So if people are adapting and they kind of know that, they may not mention it.
Even say, because I think I've got it, but I'm adapting.
Exactly. And so it just may not be mentioned.
And you talked about this a little bit, but does it primarily last just for the time that it's very, very, January, February seems to be
kind of the peak.
The peak of it. But it can last from
August to May.
Around here?
Yes.
Like people are like, I know it's coming.
Yes, I know it's coming, and sometimes it's still cold. March, April, you get the springtime, and then we get a little bit of a rain season.
Yeah.
So it's still kind of a little gray, overcast. Not quite as sunny, although it's getting there. So yes.
But the peak is January, February.
Correct.
Oh,
those just harder, shorter days of cold.
Yeah.
And we've had some bitter cold already.
We've had some fun. Prevention. Is there anything that can prevent it or sort of build up some resiliency to it, or?
Not that I found.
Okay.
But again, once you kind of know that you're going into it, I guess to say some preventative, where if you know that you have seasonal affective disorder, and our days are getting shorter, maybe investing in, talking to your doctor about some light therapy.
Okay.
Or
kind of like these lights we were joking.
Correct.
Come on the show. In January. It'll help you.
I'm not sure if they're the right bulbs. Like there's specific light bulbs and everything.
Right.
But
so my kitchen light is probably not the right one. There's actually therapeutic light.
There is, because it's UV bulbs, just like the sun would give you.
Okay.
And so there are what they call light boxes, and again, you can purchase them over the internet, but there are some very different qualities of a light box. And so, your physician might be a good resource, or just doing some quality research on the internet, because some products, with everything, there's better than others, and so you would just really want to look at that.
Okay. And then talking to your doctor about, you said there were some supplements and different things, and your diet impacts this, so talking to them about, all right, it's getting into the winter months, I know all I want is spaghetti.
Carbs, right.
But
maybe looking at, and even with your doctor, depending on how intense, they may prescribe a specific medication that's related to an antidepressant, or if you already have mental health concerns, maybe increasing it a little bit this time of year. But there is melatonin in tablets, tablet form, so maybe the doctor might recommend that. And again, with the light therapy, you're actually supposed to do it at certain times of the day. If you do it late in the evening, it could actually keep you awake, because it's...
And you don't want that.
Right, because it's supposed to produce a sense of sunlight. Okay. So you wouldn't really want to do that at night.
Late at night.
Correct.
So talking to your doctor, reaching out to a mental health service somewhere, those are kind of the ways that you would recommend if somebody has a concern about themselves or somebody that they know. Is that kind of the...
Correct. And then just, how can you have more of a balanced every meal, balanced breakfast, lunch, and dinner in terms of, minimizing the portion controls of some of those sugary foods and starches, and increasing your fruits, vegetables, healthy proteins, just to give you that good energy to keep you sustaining throughout the day and not having those crashes from sugar. And even pasta, but maybe whole grain, to where it
with
doesn't
some
have
tomatoes in it or something.
Yeah, it doesn't have that same high-low impact of sugar.
Okay. So talking with somebody, not taking it lightly, but reaching out to somebody if you have a concern or somebody else has a concern. That's kind of sounds like what you would recommend
to
people.
And there's, definitely, including Firelands, there's definitely several agencies in terms of some mental health support, but obviously, just someone that is a professional in this field, and there's no shame. We don't. It's part of the reason why we went into this field. We don't judge. We don't criticize. We don't.
It is a biological. We've mentioned it a couple times on different issues around here, but it's just like you said, diabetes, heart disease.
Right. Grief. I mean, just all of it is a natural part of life.
Right.
None of us feel good all of the time.
Right.
And sometimes when we all know we don't all have a great supportive family, we'd like that, but sometimes they don't understand. And sometimes that neutral party can get you thinking just a little bit differently and give you some things to think about and challenge you a little bit in a different way.
And kind of pick apart, and I think maybe we were talking about this at the break maybe, but picking it apart. It's not just one big problem that, okay, let's address this.
Let's address this area,
let's peel it apart and deal with it, and then it's not such a big
how are you sleeping? Well, if you don't have a good sleep routine, a clinician can help you develop a good sleep routine.
Right.
If you don't have, we're not necessarily nutritionists, but we can kind of pick apart, well, what are you eating?
Right.
Or who do you have in your life and how are you talking about it? If you've got some maybe relationship struggles too, you're just kind of compounding everything. Right. So let's sort through it.
So nutrition, sleep, light, UV, like similar to sunlight, diet.
Supplements maybe.
Supplements. Is there also like a support system, or just, you kind of joke in a neighborhood that in the winter I drive into my garage and I shut my door because it's freezing, and then I just go inside, whereas in the summer you hang out outside and you talk to your neighbors. Is there some social aspect to it too, that if you just reach out to friends or call people on the phone, does that have a therapeutic effect on it, or can it?
I can't imagine that it wouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, as human beings, we have the desire to be connected.
Right.
And so maybe making that extra effort of, that book club or going somewhere once a month, but yes, it is very easy to do that because you don't want to hang out outside.
I'm not letting that cold air in my garage. I'm going to shut it and I just go inside.
Right. And maybe you make the extra effort that when you're actually on your way home from work, you meet up somewhere and you make those plans that way rather than, because when we're home a lot of times.
And especially true in the winter. I think about different exercise classes or social groups or something, but I tend to be less likely to do that in the winter because once I'm home and I've got the boots off and I'm all cozy inside, I don't want to go back outside.
Yeah, so you make those efforts to do it
before you get home.
Before you get home.
Yeah. Like
absolutely.
Grocery shopping. Do it before you get home because it won't happen.
Exactly.
Do you have any final thoughts or something that we didn't cover, just that you would want people to know about or to feel comfortable about?
Just that the biggest thing is that it's normal.
Especially in Ohio.
Yeah, especially in Ohio. In, just the shorter days, hard, cold, gray days, that there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
If you're not feeling that great. And just that there is support out there, and we want to be able to support people. Again, that's why, counseling exists.
Right.
And has existed. And we're not designed to be a friend, but we are designed to be a good ear with some good clinical knowledge to give you some things to think about in terms of some lifestyle changes that can help you feel better.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to take another break and we'll be right back. Thank Kari for being our guest today, talking about seasonal affective disorder, a very timely topic year after year. Rears its ugly head about the same time. Learned a lot of different things today about it, what it is, what it isn't, and that it can affect people with extreme heat too, which I thought was interesting. Makes me feel a little better, I guess. And I guess the thing we really talked about was it's a pretty common problem, or it's normal, it happens, and to reach out to somebody, your family physician, mental health agency, just reach out to somebody. And again, take this information. Maybe you might not have any questions, but maybe you know somebody who does, so be sure to share the information. And if you ever have feedback about a program or a suggestion for a future episode, please let us know by sending a note to Time for Health, 615 Fulton Street, Port Clinton, Ohio, 43452, or you can email Carla Pelz at the high school, CPELZ at pccsd-k12.net. So again, happy winter. Take this information for you or for somebody that you might know. Be sure to share it. And until we meet again, I encourage you to make time for health.